Welcome to the Stop Down Photography Podcast, episode 36. I'm your host, Scott Davenport. Today's topic is AI and the role it plays in photography. Hi, welcome. Thanks for joining me today. I'm glad to be back for another chat about photography, this shared passion of ours. And in today's episode, let's take one more step on our never-ending journey of photography. Today's topic, the role of artificial intelligence, or AI, in photography. And what prompted me to talk about this subject today is an announcement from Sklum last week. They announced this new product, Luminar AI. Now, Sklum is a strong player in the AI space for post-processing, and I got a lot, and I mean a lot, of questions from you all about Luminar AI. What is it all about? What does it mean? All sorts of things. And I thought about doing an entire podcast just about Luminar AI. However, if you've been with me from the very beginning of this podcast, you know I didn't set out to make yet another photo news podcast or explain products or run down the latest pieces of gear. That may come in time to time, but not to occupy an entire episode. My intention with the Stop Down Photography Podcast is to spend time thinking about the craft, asking questions and talking about subjects that help us move forward with our art. Why are we making photos? Where can we find inspiration? These kinds of things. So I decided not to do an episode specifically about Luminar AI, but if you're curious about what Luminar AI is all about, I do have a blog post on my website, scottdavenportphoto.com, with a rundown of Luminar AI and my thoughts about Sklum's announcement and what this product looks like it's shaping up to be. I have a link in the show notes so you can go check that out. But here on Stop Down Podcast, let's take a step back. Let's talk about AI and photography in a larger sense. What is the role of AI in our photography, and what does it mean for us as artists? If you enjoyed today's podcast, please share it with a friend, share it on social media, tell your camera club, and if you can, please leave a rating on Apple Podcasts. Fresh, current ratings really help photographers find out about the show and keeps us on the radar. So these questions I got when Sklum made their announcement, people asking all about AI, these form a good foundation to build our discussion around AI and photography. The questions kind of boiled down into a handful of classes, and they're of the form, kind of like this. Does AI mean all the time I spent learning about post-processing is now wasted effort? Isn't this whole AI thing cheating? You're not really a photographer if you're using AI. And how are my photos going to stand out with AI on the scene? And these all kind of fall into the classic triad that marketers sometimes throw at us: fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So I thought we'd take these classes of questions in turn. So the first one, is the time spent learning post-processing wasted? Now, strangely, my first thought about questions like these are from an economic-themed point of view, sunk costs. And it's time already spent, it's time already invested, it's a sunk cost. The time is not going to be recouped, and so worrying about it or lamenting it, it's just a burden. Don't weigh down your creative mind with that. Just move forward, look ahead. But let's dig further, because dismissing the past as purely a sunk cost, I don't think that's quite right. I do think the knowledge you have, if you've built up a body of knowledge about post-processing, that will continue to be valuable even in an AI-powered photographic world. What you've learned is not wasted effort. You've learned foundational principles. Back in elementary or primary school, I learned addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. Well, now I use a calculator most of the time. But it doesn't mean learning basic math was a waste of time. But the time invested in post-processing is experience gained. And that's experience you can leverage with AI. Computational photography will take a photo pretty far. Actually really does a good job, maybe 80 to 90% of the way there. But then as artists, we usually want to put our own personal spin or accent or touch on a photo. And the more you know about post-processing, the easier it is to fine-tune whatever an AI-powered edit has done. Your trained eye will more quickly determine what are the extra accents your photo needs. A little more contrast? Some darkening in the shadows? Maybe the highlights need a touch of warmth? What about a LUT or some other kind of color grading? These are things that the more experience you have with, I'll say, traditional post-processing are going to serve you well. Those are your finishing touches. And of course, you don't need to use the AI at all. Now, if you enjoy post-processing and you've invested time in it and you like working with filters and sliders and layers and everything, that brings you joy, then go do it. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So no, I don't think time spent learning post-processing is wasted, and I don't think that the skills will go unused in the future. All right, second one. Is AI cheating and you're not a real photographer if you rely on AI? And this one, I tell you, is a slippery, slippery slope. Now, we were just talking about post-processing, so think about this for a moment and answer honestly. Do you use the auto button in your post-processing tool? A few years ago, it was a lot more common to manually adjust basics, exposure, highlights, shadow, black point, white point, vibrance, all that by hand. And then the auto button in Lightroom, in OnePhoto RAW, and other tools, it got better and better and better. And now, speaking for myself, I'll start my editing sessions by hitting that auto button. Why? It speeds up my workflow. And right there, that's the whole point of AI in photography. For me, it's about getting to results faster. Now, am I cheating because I use the auto button? I don't think so. I'm leveraging a tool. Well, let's drill down a little more. Do you like keywording your images? Most photographers I know don't bother to keyword, not because they don't understand the value. It's because it's tedious and it's not particularly fun to do. Well, what if an AI can analyze and identify the elements, the colors, the orientation, the location, all sorts of things in your photo and add the keywords automatically? And maybe go further and add keywords that are most likely to be searched for to match your particular photo. That would increase the likelihood of an art director or a marketing person finding your image and wanting it for their next project. And I know there are tools out there that are doing this type of work. Is that cheating? I don't see it that way. I see it as progress, leveraging a tool and letting me focus on art and not keywords. What about content-aware fill? That's another AI. Do you miss retouching photos pixel by pixel? I usually don't hear anyone complaining or crying foul when Adobe improves Photoshop's content-aware fill or the tech behind subject-aware selection. Okay, yes, these are somewhat leading questions, but my point is to underscore that we are already using AI and have been for years. New tools that come along, like Luminar AI, they take it to another level, handling a multitude of adjustments for an image in just a handful of sliders or sometimes just one. Well, let's keep going. Let's keep drilling down AI's role as a photographer. It's not just about post-processing, right? Think about your camera. Do you use autofocus in your camera? What about subject tracking? Do you shoot in aperture or shutter priority mode? What about metering? Do you let the camera do the matrix or evaluative metering? These are all smarts built into your camera to help you get a proper exposure. It's AI, especially things like autofocus, metering, subject tracking. It's pretty amazing, actually. You pick a spot, you let the camera think for a microsecond, and get a properly exposed, sharp, in-focus image. And I was never personally good at manual focus, so I don't miss that. These are all part of photography already. AI in photography is not, air quotes, cheating. It's quite the opposite. AI is lowering barriers for photographers and letting us spend our energy on creativity, not mechanics. All right, that third class of questions. How will my work stand out in this new AI world? I think the concern behind this question is as AI in photography gets better and better, the cameras do more, the processing tools do more, it's easier than ever for anyone, photographers, non-photographers, to make very good photos. Smartphones already taught us that. The camera in our pocket makes great images with little effort. So I see it as simple as this. Good work stands out because it's good work. It all starts with a good frame. A photographer still needs to make that original photo. And you know this, right? You're out and about with your camera, you see something in the world, the synapses in your brain tingle, you see a photo there, you start working the scene, and you capture it. You, the artist, can continue to stand out with your subject choice. Not every photographer can capture what you can. It could be as simple as where you live. There are only so many people that live where you live, and most people on the planet don't live where you live. Or you may have a passion for a particular subject, and you know it more intimately than others. You photograph it often, you work with it more, and that will translate to stronger, unique photos. You can stand out with your framing, your composition, and yes, you can stand out with your post-processing. AI is doing the fundamentals, and it's doing them very well. And as AI improves, it will add style and mood to different scenes, different photos. But you, the artist, can still add your own creative spin. AI has its limits, and it can't think outside of the box it's been trained on. You can. So to tie this up, I view AI in photography as another tool that I can use as an artist. AI can take some of the burden off my shoulders, remove some of the monotony from my photography. It lowers barriers, it can streamline my workflow, and I can farm out the mundane, routine steps to a faster algorithm. Here's an analogy. It kind of works. In the film days, I never processed my own film. I don't know chemicals, mixers, sulfates, nitrates, other stuff that ends in eights. I would contract film to a lab. I'd let the film lab do the processing. Now that did mean I relinquished a certain level of control. I didn't have the options to tweak the chemistry or to do dodging and burning during the development of a negative. And that was an acceptable trade-off for me at that stage in my photography. With AI or computational photography or whatever you'd like to call it, it's a similar principle. You have the choice to farm out lower level tasks. Let your camera handle focus and exposure metering. Let a smart processing tool do the basics of exposure, contrast, highlights. But you, the artist, maintain control over the entire process, right? Camera settings can be overridden. Processing choices from an AI can be overruled. You still maintain control end to end of how much or how little you let the AI help you. I'd say that AI already plays an integral part in our photography, and it's very, very likely you're already using AI in your camera and in your digital tools. It's a facilitator. It speeds up your workflow, both in the field and in the studio. When you're in the field, you're not worrying about locking focus or having something wildly overexposed. Let the camera handle that. You're freed up to pay attention to the scene at hand, composition, angle, light, the posing of your subject. You can focus on creativity more and the technical aspects less. In post-processing, it's the same thing. The mundane things that every photo needs, contract that out to AI. Let the AI get your photo most of the way there, and then finish it off with your own signature look. So leverage AI. Leverage it as freedom. It complements our photography. It enables our creativity. Photography has always been a blend of artistry and technology. As the technology improves, we get to shift our attention toward the artistry. The AI does the mundane and the repetitive, and we spend our time and energy on being creative. I'd like to hear your thoughts about AI and photography, how you're choosing to use it, whether you find certain limitations or certain freedoms from AI. Drop me a message. You can go to the contact form on stopdownpodcast.com. Messages come straight to me. I'd really like to hear from you. I also want to thank the supporters on Patreon. It is your support that makes this podcast possible. Got a couple of new folks that signed up this week. Thanks very much for your support. You're helping thousands of photographers enjoy photography, improve our craft. If you're interested in learning more about the Patreon community, check the show notes. There's also a support the show button on every page of Stop Down Podcast where you can learn more. And that will wrap up this week's episode. I do hope to hear your thoughts about AI in photography. And I'm starting to put together another topic for next week. I'm toying with a couple of different ideas. We'll see which one lands next week. And once more, if you enjoyed today's podcast, please tell a friend. And if you can rate it on Apple Podcasts, I would very, very much appreciate it. Until next time, my name is Scott Davenport. Have fun.